The skeleton warriors succeeded in swarming the boss, but the Goblin King was able to use the shockwave skill, and it jumped into the air and landed on the ground. The monster's skill was more effective at repelling the skeleton warriors than the Wolf King's roar skill. Following his previous attack, the Goblin King used the fire breath skill. Lin's skeleton warriors were engulfed in the flame, and he had no choice but to command them to return to the summoning space. The Goblin King's fire breath skill was causing trouble, and he needed a way to interrupt it. The boss monster activated the skill again, and Lin summoned more skeletons to distract it and used the soul flame skill. Lin succeeded in interrupting the boss monster's skill, but he was running low on spirit energy, so he summoned the rest of the skeleton warriors from the summoning space. The skeleton warriors continued to attack the Goblin King until it was defeated. As a reward, Lin received 40,000 experience points, the bronze level goblin sword, bronze level wisdom robe, and the Goblin King's core. Lin also reached level 12. Lin observed his rewards. The robe of wisdom shortened the cooldown of his skills by 5%. The cooldown wasn't much use to Lin, but the robe increased his spirit stat and health stat by 10. Other than the dagger and the wisdom robe, Lin also received the Goblin King's core, a valuable item that cost about 30,000 gold. At the moment, the core and the dagger were of no use to him, so he stored them away. And because his spirit energy was replenished, he summoned 4 more skeleton warriors before leaving the dungeon. Lin appeared at the entrance of the dungeon and caught the attention of all the hunters. They were surprised that he was able to solo clear the dungeon, and he was wearing the wisdom robe. Lin walked through the crowd too deep and thought to pay attention to the other hunters. The dungeon had a 12-hour cooldown, but hunting monsters outside the dungeon wasn't effective, so he decided to wait for the 12-hour cooldown. From the dungeon, Lin figured out his biggest weakness and how his skills worked. If he could use his corpse explosion skill properly, then it would become an overpowered skill, and his soul flame skill can interrupt an enemy's skill and ignores their defense. Lin went back to meditating, and 12 hours later the cooldown for the dungeon was up, and he could summon 4 more skeleton warriors. As he made his way to the entrance of the dungeon, he noticed a party of hunters gathered around a campfire. Seeing the party around the campfire made him recall Ning Yi. Lin made his way to the entrance and noticed that it was crowded with people. A guild called the Dynasty Guild, and the other hunters were in a standoff. The Dynasty Guild stood at the entrance, stopping anyone from challenging the dungeon. The hunters complained, and a mage from the Dynasty Guild affirmed again that no one could challenge the dungeon until their leader completed his task. But the hunters continued to protest. The mage activated his fireball skill, killing one of the protesters. The other hunters panicked and asked how he could just kill someone like that. The mage taunted the crowd, saying if they had the guts, then they could try taking revenge on the Dynasty Guild. Lin approached one of the hunters and asked what was going on. The hunter recognized him as the person who cleared the nightmare difficulty of the dungeon by himself, and he explained that the Dynasty Guild was after the Goblin King core drop. But the drop rate is very low. However, it is guaranteed to drop in the nightmare difficulty once every 100 days. Today was the 100th day, and the Dynasty Guild leader went inside the dungeon, and he ordered his members to keep the others from entering. The Dynasty Guild had made a mission for hunters to get the Goblin King's core, but no one was able to complete it, and they were paying way less than the core was worth. Lin wondered if it was a coincidence that the Goblin King's core dropped for him. He turned to the hunter and asked him what the core was used for. The hunter explained that the core can be used to make a ring that increases all stats by 10 and increases all skill levels by 1, but it required the hunter to be level 15 to use it. To a beginner, the ring would seem like an overpowered accessory. Rumors had it that the guild leader of the Dynasty Guild was aiming for Xia Jing Academy, and is the reason he wanted the core so badly. They had everything else they needed to make the ring, but the Goblin King's core was still missing. Lin walked towards the portal to enter the dungeon. He didn't care about the Dynasty Guild's mission. They were just getting in his way of leveling up. The hunter tried to stop him, but with his skeleton warrior, Lin proceeded to approach the entrance portal. Noticing that Lin was approaching, the mage stepped on the body of the hunter he killed and asked Lin if he was looking to die, just like the hunter below his feet. Lin stared at them coldly, ordering them to get lost. All of the members of the Dynasty Guild were well armored, and a kid dared to challenge them. The mage kicked the dead body of the hunter he killed away, and he asked Lin if he knew who he was talking to. Again, Lin glared at them coldly and told them to get lost. The mage used the detection spell and saw that Lin was a level 12 necromancer. He laughed at the fact that a level 12 dared to order the Dynasty Guild around. The other hunters tried to pull Lin back, but he was paying them no mind. Again, Lin glared at the mage coldly, and his gaze made the mage nervous. Lin started walking towards them, and the mage lifted up his staff and dared Lin to take another step. Lin continued to approach them, so the mage ordered the Dynasty Guild members to kill Lin. Lin ordered his skeleton warrior to attack, and the mage quickly activated a shield. In one strike, the skeleton warrior almost broke the shield. The mage was stunned. His shield should be able to withstand 5 attacks from level 20 hunters like him, but after just one hit from the skeleton warrior, his shield was almost broken. Lin ordered the skeleton warrior to use the rage strike skill. The mage was scared for his life. He never would have guessed that the skeleton warrior could use skills too, and if the next attack lands, he would die for sure. So he activated the fire repulsion ring skill and pushed the skeleton warrior back. Afterwards, the mage ordered the other members to attack. A knight used the shield bash attack on the skeleton warrior, but he was sent flying with one swing of the skeleton warrior's sword. The skeleton jumped at the mage following Lin's command. The mage quickly instructed the other members to kill Lin. The best way to kill a summons is to kill the summoner instead of his summons. 2 archers activate the triple shot skill and fire it at Lin. The other hunters called out for Lin to dodge, but he didn't bother. Instead, he summoned 2 more skeletons from the summon space. The 2 skeletons easily blocked the arrows, shocking the hunters. The mage managed to repel the skeleton warrior that was charging at him. He shouted, and immediately all of the knight rushed in front of him, shielding him from any incoming attacks. With no immediate danger, the mage started to cast a spell. He lifted his staff in the air and activated the Fire Serpent Dance skill. This is a rare skill that only 1 in 3 mages are able to learn. It is the strongest skill for mages that are level 20. The skill was directed at Lin and his skeletons. The skeletons were engulfed in the flame. However, in the midst of the flames, the skeleton warriors charged at the Dynasty Guild's members. The mage's face turned pale. He was already surprised by the 3 skeleton warriors earlier, and he never expected that Lin could summon more, to the point where they exceeded their numbers. The mage snapped out of it and ordered the members to get into formation. Then he lifted his staff and granted them a strength boost, speed boost, agility boost, and spirit boost. He also ordered the other members with a support profession to give the other members more spells to enhance their stats. The Dynasty Guild members are experienced in working together, and their formation proved that. Lin turned back to the hunters and asked them to step back. Afterwards, he activated his Soul Flame skill and aimed for one of the archers in the middle of the formation. The skill landed successfully, and instantly the healers of the Dynasty Guild did their best to heal the archer. But after casting countless heal spells on the archer, he still died. The mage, witnessing this, started questioning if the whole Dynasty Guild was really about to be wiped out by one man. Lin ordered the skeleton warriors to group up and attack. The tanks on the front line of the Dynasty Guild formation activated the shield skill, but the skill couldn't last long. The supporters casted one buff spell after the other, but still the skeletons were able to break through. Lin used the Soul Flame skill once again, and as the tank burnt, the skeleton warriors finished him off. When the tank fell, an opening was created in the Dynasty Guild's formation, and the skeleton warriors made their way through, killing all the members. All the mage could do was watch as the killing ensued. He wanted to order them to run, but it was too late. A skeleton warrior lifted the dead body of the tank in the air and threw it in the middle of the formation. Then Lin used the corpse explosion skill, and the tank's corpse detonated, causing a violent explosion. All that was left after the explosion was the corpse of the Dynasty Guild members. Lin walked through the corpse, and at the portal entrance he activated the corpse explosion skill again. After he entered the dungeon, the other hunters were in shock. Lin had killed all the members of the Dynasty Guild, and nothing was left behind, not even the corpses. They became scared that the guild leader would exit the dungeon and blame them for the guild members' death. They all agreed to leave the area and go somewhere where no one could find them. Half an hour later, the boss of the Dynasty Guild was teleported out of the dungeon after failing to get the Goblin King's core. A woman beside him noticed that there wasn't a single person nearby. The guild leader ordered the woman to send a message to see if their guild members were close by, but there was no response. The guild leader started to panic. The mage should be the strongest hunter in the area, and if he was killed, why is there no trace? Things may get dangerous if they stayed longer, so they left. 1 hour later, inside the dungeon, Lin killed the Goblin King for the second time. He received 40,000 experience points, a bronze rank weapon, Goblin King's magic book, and a low-level monster core. He didn't receive the Goblin King's core like the first time, but a monster core was still a good drop. Lin wanted to try the Goblin King's ring, but he didn't know any alchemist to craft it for him, so he decided to wait until he got into the Jiajing Academy. Lin sat on the dead Goblin King's corpse and opened the Goblin King's magic book. The book granted him 10 points to spirit, 10 to defense, and 3% magic attack power. It would be useful for Lin's Soul Flame skill and corpse explosion, but it did nothing for his skeleton warriors. In the process of killing the Goblin King, Lin reached level 13. He quickly calculated that if he wanted to reach level 15, then he would need to complete the dungeon 3 more times. He was running out of time, and at most he could do 5 more dungeons and reach level 16. He wanted to level up a bit more, but level 16 should be enough for him to get into Jiajing Academy. He teleported out of the dungeon, and outside he noticed that everyone was gone. But he expected this. The dungeon was on cooldown, so he decided to come back the next day. The next day we see Xia, who had finally reached level 10 and could challenge the High Mind dungeon. She was proud of herself. But this quickly changed after she noticed Lin entering the dungeon alone. She couldn't believe that Lin had leveled up to the point where he could solo the dungeon. However, she was more determined than ever to not lose to Lin, and she also had a rare profession, so it shouldn't be hard for her to find a party. 45 minutes later, Lin arrived in the final boss room. After leveling up and meditating, Lin had summoned a total of 72 skeleton warriors. The Goblin King woke up, but by the time it stood, Lin had already defeated it. After defeating the Goblin King, Lin gained 40,000 experience. The loot was the same except for the bronze rank bow. The Goblin King seemed frustrated, and Lin waved his hand indicating that the monster shouldn't be surprised that it was killed, since monsters are meant to be killed. He didn't want to kill the Goblin King, but there was no other way. He needed to level up. Another 12 hours passed and Lin returned to his friend. They were quite acquainted already, so the Goblin King shouldn't be surprised to see Lin 3 more times. Lin quickly killed the Goblin King and reached level 14 and obtained the Goblin King scepter that increased his spirit by 10, defense by 10, and magic power by 3%. After reaching level 14, the number of skeletons he had in the summon space was now 76, but he still hasn't found a way to increase the level of the skeleton warrior's skill. And while meditating outside the dungeon, Xia called out to him. She looked like she just came out of the dungeon. She stared at Lin and asked him what level he was. Lin told her that he was level 14. She was shocked. Her party had used up all of their energy and she was barely able to reach level 11. She couldn't believe it. During the novice dungeon, there was only a 2-level difference between them, but that difference seems to be growing. She walked away to find another party. Xia entered the dungeon again. Lin couldn't believe it. Dungeons had cooldowns, but Xia was challenging a dungeon again after just coming out. 1 hour later, she came out of the dungeon exhausted, but after seeing Lin, she motivated herself to find another party. 1 hour later, she came out of the dungeon looking worse than before. Lin wanted to ask her about the dungeon cooldown, but Xia quickly accepted a request for party members. Half an hour later, she exited the dungeon. She looked beyond exhausted, but she reached level 12 and was closing the gap between her and Lin. She sat down next to Lin, and Lin looked down at her and asked her if she wasn't tired. She replied saying that she was, but after being overshadowed by Lin for so many years, her being exhausted wasn't going to stand in her way of surpassing him. Surpassing Lin wasn't her only goal. She also wanted to enter Jiajing Academy. Lin was trying to help her out, so he told her that if she challenged the nightmare difficulty, then she would level up faster. But this was out of the question for her. Challenging the nightmare difficulty required an elite party, but elite parties only allowed level 16 and 17 professionals to join them. Lin looked at her and was finally able to ask how she managed to ignore the dungeon cooldown. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, then hit the like button.